Hello, friends. I'm Kush Khandelwal, and this is Ageless Athlete. A few years ago, I started asking questions that would not leave me alone. Why do some people keep pushing mentally, physically, spiritually long after others burn out or break down? What does it really mean to age well when you still crave movement, meaning, and mastery? This show is my search for answers. Each week, I talk to elite athletes, everyday adventurers, and pioneering researchers who are stretching the limits of what's possible across age, injury, illness, and self doubt. You will hear hard won lessons, untold stories, and science backed strategies for building a body and mindset that lasts. For those of us joining for the first time, welcome to the show. For the rest, thank you for joining us again. Time is our most valuable asset, and I deeply appreciate you giving me your time today.
Imagine waking up in the shadow of Canada's vast peaks. The air is thin and sharp, the kind that makes you feel small but fully alive. You shoulder a rope and step into the unknown, chasing lines of stone that no one has ever touched. For most of us, this is the stuff of dreams, but for Sonnie Trotter, this has been a way of life. Sonnie is arguably Canada's best modern rock climber. His name tied to legendary routes like Cobra Crack in Squamish, the Path in Lake Louise, and audacious first ascents across North America. His story, though, is more than just difficulty ratings or bold ascents. It's about conviction, the willingness to put everything on the line for a dream, to live out of a van when it wasn't cool or Instagrammable, to walk away from safety and certainty in order to feel fully alive. Today, Sonnie reflects on what it means to go all in, to turn passion into a life, and to make hard choices, like backing off an unclimbed alpine wall with Tommy Caldwell when fatherhood and risk collided in a single heartbeat. We will talk about van life with a young family and what it teaches about chaos, beauty, and resilience. We will dive into his process of reverse engineering climbs that seem impossible and what everyday athletes can learn from his approach. Yes, I actually loved this part and I am adopting this or stealing this for my own training. We will also explore his evolving philosophy on legacy health and why recovery, especially sleep, may be the ultimate superpower for longevity in life and also performance. I used to read Sonnie's blog way back in the day before the days of Instagram and maybe even before Facebook became popular. I loved Sonnie's storytelling, and hence I was overjoyed when I heard about Sonnie's book Uplifted. Yes, I just had to go grab Sonnie's book and I absolutely loved it. So stay with us to the end and we will cover some of Sonnie's book and you will come away with more than climbing stories. You will leave with lessons on desire, conviction, and the art of building a meaningful life, one deliberate move at a time. I always start with this question, Sonnie, which is, where are you right now and what did you have for breakfast this morning?
Oh, that's very unique. I am currently in Canmore, Alberta. We're 15 minutes outside of Banff National Park. And I made waffles for our children and I ate some as well with a banana and a yellow pear. Have you ever had like a Asian pear? Our daughter loves the sweet fruit. Our son is incredibly diverse. He seems to like everything and anything at this point. At 11 years old, his appetite is he's quite tall for his age, and so his appetite is expansive now. And my wife's done an incredible job of exposing them. She's quite into food around the world. She just loves, actually one of her favorite places was visiting New York City because of the range of a very, very like authentic food flavors, not just like Americanized or whatever, or it was like very authentic. On one street, she could sample so many different things, and she really brought that into our home. So I think our kids have been exposed to a lot of different unique flavors, which is very different from how I grew up. I grew up with very classic, Canadian sort of standard breakfast options. So anyway, but waffles are still yummy and a staple. So
I was gonna say yes, maybe a lot of kids would probably accept a less appetizing side if there were waffles
yeah,
served next to those. Actually, it's funny. I was traveling recently, and I was at this really basic motel, and they had that little breakfast counter in the morning, very basic.
yeah,
But they had a waffle maker.
right.
That got me excited.
Well, it does a good job of filling you up for the morning, right? Like if you're in a pinch, we often do. We actually eat a lot of eggs. I don't, for better or for worse. We eat a lot of eggs. My wife loves to give them a good dose of protein before they get to school, things like that. So we just don't have any today. So that's what we did. Fruit and waffles. Yeah.
Sonnie, for those of us who may not know who you are, how do you describe yourself these days?
Oh, that's a tricky one. Well, I'm primarily a husband and father. That's my main role in life right now, I'd say. And my career has been kind of a mix, but it's all surrounded by my love for climbing. I got into climbing when I was like 15, 16 years old. And by 17, that was my job. I was working as working birthday parties and ballet groups, like whatever a 17-year-old could do. I was working in the climbing industry, and I've slowly just stayed on track, on path. And I've done so many different types of jobs in climbing gyms, rock guiding. I've worked with many incredible sponsors over the years. And I've recently also published a book with Patagonia Books publishing branch. So how do I describe myself? Rock climber, husband, father, son, brother, and just passionate about being in the mountains.
Sonnie, I am so excited about having you on the podcast. I started climbing a little bit over 20 years ago, and back then we did not have social media the same way. And I used to love scouring the internet, and I was a keen reader. And I think I started following your blog way back when. So you would write this evocative blog with story coupled with like some climbing wisdom, coupled with maybe some training tips on how you were preparing for like upcoming projects. So I guess I was not surprised when you wrote a book, because you obviously have not just a talent, but like a love for sharing your ideas and your thoughts and your adventures through the written word. And in some way, I saw echoes of my own journey as well. You have followed the climber's path, maybe a bit more assiduously than I have or many people have. And the book brings together all these beautiful stories, these adventures, and they are all tied together with this common thread of your pursuit of climbing. So I'm wondering if you could maybe pick on one story which kind of pulls it together, the adventure, the climbing, the risk, and share that with us.
Ooh, one story. Well, I first of all, I appreciate the kind words, and it's been many years actually since I think blogging has was replaced by social media, right? The first thing that comes to my mind is probably the opening chapter of the book. And I think it's because that chapter, I don't know if it comes through in the book or not, but what I felt when I experienced that or when I reflected on it and when I wrote about it was that it encompassed so many things, turning points in my life. I had recently gotten married. I have this long relationship with one of my climbing mentors and friend, Tommy Caldwell, who yet to this day is one of the most inspiring people I know. And so that was an amazing. And then we tried to do this climb that is absolutely stunning. This big, beautiful wall on the side of a giant mountain top. And we didn't do it. We did not. We turned back. And a lot of that reasoning is because of me. My wife was pregnant at the time with our first child. And I've always wanted to be a dad. I've always wanted to be a father. And for as long as I can remember anyway. And so this climbing moment where I was not comfortable taking any more risk. And I was like, I just want to go home. And that was a kind of a turning point. And I'd say it encompassed a bit of adventure because there was we kind of made a mistake by climbing in the heat with all this rock fall that was coming around us in this giant amphitheater. And I think in retrospect, we learned a lot about the mountain. And I think that's part of climbing and mountaineering is you learn, you adapt, and you try again, and you fix the mistakes. And so we learned about the approach could be better. We learned the timing of the year, all this stuff. And we learned where the rockfall could potentially come. But at the same time, it was a really scary place to be. So if I had to think of one chapter or one moment that was a very memorable for me, it was that one. It was I want to be a dad. I want to build a family and taking risk where I couldn't control the outcome. I felt when there's rockfall, all it takes is one really unfortunate situation and your whole life can turn around. And so I wasn't prepared to continue on that climb. And I had to tell my mentor, my one of my best friends, Tommy, I was like, I'm not into this anymore. I'm ready to go home. And we had really just started. We weren't even on the face. We weren't even on the difficult part of the climb. And we were prepared to, stay on the wall for 3 days. And we didn't even get through the first day. And so I think I chose that as my opening chapter because that was very memorable for me. And I had a lot of strong feelings about that whole experience,
That is a beautiful start to your book. I did not expect that first part of the book to be that. And I also didn't expect that answer from you because you have stories of these very dramatic and wild adventures in your book, in in the US and Canada, down to Mexico, being clearly in, let's say, Mexican cartel territory. But that climb or that attempt you had with Tommy, that story is so thoughtful. It's reflective and also sobering because we celebrate all the sends, all the summits, the accomplishments. But then in between that, there's this huge layer of things that did not get done and difficult decisions one had to make. And the weight of those decisions, because it takes a lot of effort to plan a trip like that, because you had Tommy visit you and spend time with you. And the Canadian climbing season is a little bit different than California. You have a shorter window. Did you ever get back on that? I can't remember if that's in the book. Did you ever get back to completing that climb, Sonnie?
We have not. No. It's funny because we talk about it every year. We're like, hey, should we should we go back? Because it's still unclimbed, and it's a remarkable face. It's just so stunning. And I'm sure someone will hear about it or read about it and will be inspired to go attempt it. And hopefully it does get climbed, whether it's by us or somebody else. But yeah, you're right. It's a lot of effort to sort of like, set up for a climb like this. Our biggest mistake was that we approached it like LCAP. We approached it like a rock climb. And it's just not. It's an alpine objective, and we were prepared to implement rock climbing tactics. Like that was our objective, was to climb the steepest, most, sheer part of the face. But surrounding that face is this very vulnerable mountainside that's, kind of unpredictable. And we approached it like a rock climb. And that was our biggest mistake, was during a heat wave with so much snow and ice still melting. It just was very, just not a very stable environment. And so there's actually a really nice window, like at the end of August, maybe even the first week of September, where it's perfect climbing conditions. But then nights start to get cold at that elevation. It's a very small window of perfect climbing conditions. And no, we haven't gone back. However, I guess climber's right side of this feature, going up sort of the right flank, has been climbed. I think it's 511 or maybe, but it took them, two friends of ours have climbed it. And then when they got to the ridge, they climbed the ridge to the summit. And I think it took them a 2 or 3 days also maybe to do it. And it looked like an amazing adventure. Surprisingly good climbing on that part. There's these maybe some cracks and columns. Where we were trying to climb on the left side up the main face was more like horizontal edges. Have you ever been to Lake Louise, quartzite?
I haven't yet.
Okay.
It's on the list, but yeah.
Yeah, it's these looks like more of these horizontal edges when you can face climb up there. So anyway, no, we haven't been back.
Sonnie, tell us more about this objective. What makes it so alluring and so challenging?
Well, it's not super easy to get to. It's very high up this mountain.
What's this place? Where is it?
It's actually, it's right on the Continental Divide, basically. It's called Mount Stephen. And, this wall was called, it was coined the Great Wall of China, because when you see it from the road, I mean, it is just huge. It's huge and it's beautiful. It's very alluring. It looks like a regular mountain, and then it just sheared in half. And so there's this massive face that's just hanging over the highway. You can see it from the road anytime you drive past it. And the fact that it's just so steep and large and colorful, it's like pink and orange and purple and beige, yellow colors. Wow. And it's got all the different, it's like a mosaic. It's a beautiful wall. And the fact that it has never been done is alluring in itself. That's a climb that kind of got away. And to be honest, I don't feel sad about it at all. It would be an amazing climb to do, but there are so many other fun climbs to do. And, and when we got down, I mean, I don't know if I put this one in the book, but a couple of days later, we were cragging, doing more easy climbs with around Canmore. And Tommy was like, I think that was the right decision to come down. And at the time, it was hard to do because we were so committed, and we rarely back off things, but it did feel like the right thing to do for me emotionally.
Tommy's words must have hit you like maybe this little wave of relief in a way, because perhaps you felt that you had let your partner down, who had sacrificed and invested efforts to go on this attempt with you, and then because things didn't work out, and you got cold feet, and you had to back out.
Yeah, there's a phrase in the book where I say it. When I said I told him I was finished, I was like, I'm done. after this rock fall that, nearly hit us, that's when all my enthusiasm and everything just drained out of me. And I told him, I'm finished, I'm done. And there's a sentence in the book where it says it felt like it came from somebody else's mouth. Like I didn't feel like I was the one speaking, I felt like I just heard the words sort of in the air. But then, but Tommy's such a reasonable, he's such a high achiever, but he's also a very reasonable person. And so, he was on board with that. And a couple of hours later, we were back in the bottom of the valley and everything was fine. There was it felt so peaceful when you're down on the ground looking up. But sometimes when you're up there and you feel like you're losing control, it feels like you're like, I need to get out of here. I need to feel control again. And so I was a little bit maybe in over my head and emotionally and not physically, I would say. Like from a physical perspective, we felt like the strongest we'd ever felt in our lives. We were, I was early 30s. I felt incredibly strong and fit. It was more the environment, I think, that had me shaken,
and not just
the circumstance.
Yeah, exactly. Not just the physical environment, but also just this personal storm of circumstances that were happening in your life, like with a baby on the way.
Yeah,
I can only imagine that just this emotional explosion that's going through, and you are having to think about so many things at that time and make this decision. And you make another good point, which is something which is not always difficult to get across to non-climbers, is just how binary that situation is between being on a rock wall and being just in some level of constant risk and danger, particularly in an alpine environment. And then the moment you actually finish the last rappel and you put your approach shoes on, and it's just like food, like it just totally changes, because you're like, wow, I have left, the underworld. I'm back to like survival here. Friends, it means a lot that you're here. I pour a ton of heart into the show. The research, the interviews, the editing, it's all me, trying to share stories that matter. If Ageless Athlete has ever made you feel seen, inspired you, or just kept you company on a long drive, or better, over a run or a bike ride, I would be so grateful if you considered supporting it. Even a small amount helps keep it going, helps keep bringing the show to you for free. You can chip in at buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. Again, buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. You can find the link on the show notes as well. Thank you for listening and for being part of this.
Yeah. I think there's a line in the book too where I reflect on, like, sometimes you get back to the ground and you wonder what was all the fuss about, And but in that particular case, I still stand by that we made the right decision.
Sure.
And and to climb something like that, it really just comes down to again, timing, commitment to block off the time. I feel like today, over 10 years later, it's like we can't even can barely find the time to climb for 2 days together, So yeah, it gets a little bit trickier, but who knows? There's a lot of climbs that I'm like, I wonder if I will be able to stay fit enough to return to in my mid 50s when our kids are in their early 20s, or something like that. Like, will I have more appetite for taking on bigger objectives again like that, where, the consequences are not as severe because I've done my duty of, loving and raising these children to adults. And so there's a part of me that wonders what it'll look like in 10 years from now, So.
Canada seems to have just so much unclimbed rock. I mean, for one thing, it's just physically bigger than the US. And just like Western Canada just is huge. And I've only been to one part, the most popular, well-known climbing area, which is Squamish. But when you look at the terrain, it's just endless. So is there really just so much unclimbed rock and unexplored terrain in Canada? And is it just logistics and challenges of weather, or is it also just because Canada, for its size, doesn't really have a lot of people? So there are not so many people going after.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I think, so for example, our town of Canmore is like 15,000 people, whereas compared to maybe a Boulder, which is maybe 130,000 people or something like that with all the students, right? And a huge percentage of that population are climbers. And when you look around the Boulder, Denver, Estes Park, Loveland, like region, there's, tens of thousands of climbers. And so, and very strong, talented, capable climbers who could easily go do a route like this. And there are plenty of Canadian climbers who are incredibly strong and talented who could also put up a route like that. A lot of it just has to do with time and motivation of whether or not they're called, or they've put in the time to gain experience in an environment like that. I certainly had not. Like I treated it like a rock climb, not an alpine climb. And if you're an alpine climber in Canada, there are so many objectives still to be explored and completed. And just in, like, you talk about Canada and its potential, like just in Baffin Island alone, that is literally an endless valley of big walls, like Yosemite style big walls to climb. Endless. I think it would just go on for decades and centuries.
And like, I guess the little crucial difference might be you can fly to San Francisco and drive a few hours to get to Yosemite and be in 75-degree weather.
Yeah.
And Baffin is just a little bit...
and our season in Canada in general is quite a bit shorter. Like I was referring as a rock climb, there's maybe like a month where this is like peak conditions. So there's 11 months where you're just not able to do it. So for alpine climbing, I think the Canadian Rockies are massive. You can get into a lot of trouble here and explore new things. But yeah, we do have quite a bit of climbing, but the US is so much more vast. Like you have the Wind River Valley, you have Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, California, like even Washington. Like you have a bigger footprint, and I guess if you look at all of Canada, like I've never been up to like the Cirque, with the Northwest Territories, but yeah, I don't know. I think maybe it's very similar. We just do have a smaller population and a smaller window of potential for free climbing. So we'll see. There's this ridge line that I'd like to do on Mount Stephen. That's not very hard, maybe 510, but I've always wanted to go back just to stand on the summit of that feature. So we'll see. But this year it doesn't look like it's going to happen. And then we have the Bugaboos, which is not too far. And there's still plenty of objectives out there for sure for hungry, curious climbers. Yeah.
Sonnie, when you were talking about just the decisions that you were making, actually, you decided to turn around, family came first, one of the reasons. And it just made me think of perhaps your arc as a climber and just as a human, where you seem to be completely committed to this task at hand, this path that you find yourself on. And I guess one thing I noticed about you is compared to, let's say, other climbers at the very top end, you didn't start climbing until you were a teenager. Like you were not, unlike Tommy. Tommy started climbing, when he was a baby almost, right? And you started climbing much later, but you discovered it, and then you just went all in. That's what it seems like. So,
What it felt like.
so yeah, and I
Yeah.
feel like it just seems like, yeah, that's just this part of your personality, which is maybe it's like just this commitment. So, what gave you that self belief to take that leap at that age when you had, you discovered climbing and then you just kind of went all in and you just made all your decisions to be able to
Mm.
pursue it with full earnest?
And maybe people can relate to this or not, but climbing touched me in a certain way that I was like, this is all I want to do. I have this sort of perspective on life that maybe might be depressing for some people, but I find it more uplifting. But basically, all we're doing is just killing time on this planet because there's a beginning and an end. And in between, all we're doing is just figuring out what we like to do with our time. And living in Canada, I was fortunate enough to have like the possibility of leisure time. If I so chose to be poor, I could climb. Yeah, I didn't feel overly, other than financial commitments, I didn't feel overly restricted by other things. We live in a relatively peaceful country. So I was fortunate to have the opportunity to just commit to living in my truck, living off of, canned tuna and macaroni and cheese every night. And just, I could budget like $10 a day and just climb all the time. And so my commitment to it is just that I wasn't as happy doing anything else. I was always the most fulfilled after a long day of climbing. And so to me, I just didn't see any other path forward for the next decade of my life. I just made the decision. I remember reading Lynn Hill's book when I was like 20 years old. And I remember thinking, I just want to live like that for 10 years. Like I didn't care about education. I didn't care about having any money in the bank. I just wanted to live the next decade of my life. And I was going to figure the rest out when I was 30. I was going to figure it out later. Like I knew that if I didn't pursue that calling, I guess, that I wouldn't be nearly as fulfilled. And so, yeah, it probably was a conscious choice to say, you know what, I'm not going to pursue anything else. I'm just going to live this incredible life and travel to these incredible places because that's what made me the happiest version of myself at that time. And ultimately, choosing that path is what led me to so many other amazing things. It led me to, a career within climbing. It led me to meeting my amazing wife, who, is also passionate about these places that we love to go to, where we live, and being very physically active as well. And so it's incredible when you commit to something, how all of these other parts of life unfold. And I'm just very grateful that I was able to do that. And it was scary at times because I'm really close with my family who live back in Ontario. It was scary, like leaving and being like, I'll visit you when I can. Or friends or relationships that they weren't able to work out because of, I guess, my commitment to that climbing life, because there was a time where I was very selfish. It's like, I want to go here. How do I do that? And nothing else mattered.
Hello, friends. Just a quick break. This is not an ad. If you have been enjoying these conversations, I would love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. It is where I go deeper, sharing stories, reflections, and behind the scenes insights that don't always make it into the podcast. I write about what I'm learning from elite athletes and how to stay ageless in body and mind. If you have ever wanted a thoughtful, inspiring read that ties it all together, training, aging, mindset, and awe, you will love this. You can find the link in the show notes or just head to agelessathlete.co. Again, www.agelessathlete.co. fashionable.co, that is, to sign up. And yeah, just a couple of emails a month, and you can unsubscribe anytime. Absolutely no spam ever. Okay, back to the show.
Honey, you are quite humble about your climbing accomplishments. You are not humble about your love for climbing, but you were accomplishing the hardest climbs in North America at that time. But you didn't know that when you decided to kind of pack it all in and move into an automobile and leave your parents' home at adolescence. And was there like some deep conviction you had also that you had this talent, like you were early in the sport, but if you just went all in, you could realize this potential that was hiding in you?
I guess I did it. I mean, I wanted to climb these routes that I saw in those magazines. I was like, that, to me, that was like the ultimate. When I saw things like Just Do It, in Smith Rock, like it was such an iconic and difficult climb, but it was beautiful. It was so beautiful. And I was like, I have to go try. Like, I have to go try before I can feel, like, I don't know. I always like a restlessness. Like I was like, I have to go try that. And then after doing something like that, or some of the other routes I've done, it was like, whoa, that's crazy. Like it's incredible what we can do as humans if we are completely devoted to something. It opened my eyes to the desire. Like I think the greatest things that have been done are because of desire, right? You don't do things if like you don't push through physical uncertainty or mental or emotional uncertainty if you don't truly desire the journey. Whether the outcome is successful or not, you want to at least desire to try. And I think I just had a really strong desire. And I don't think I'm particularly talented climber above and beyond other athletes. I think there's so many exceptional climbers out there that are I just don't know if we share the same level of desire. And at that time, that's all I wanted. And so, yeah, I pursued it. I went all in. It worked out for the most part, but there are still some hard climbs that got away that I never got to try. Like Tommy's Flux Luther in Colorado. Like at that time, in that era, I was starting to spend more and more time in Canada, less time in the US. I was putting up my own routes. And so I didn't get to do all the routes I wanted that I dreamt about doing, but I did a fair chunk, and then started getting more active in putting up new routes, which, in my mid-20s, which was a super fun journey as well. That led to things like the Path and Cobra Crack and climbs here in the Rocky Mountains that were, I think I was more intrigued at that time to explore new things rather than just going around and repeating others, because that's rewarding as well. But once I discovered putting up new routes, it was a whole new level of like, I don't know, curiosity and fulfillment and joy. And so, yeah, I think my life did take sort of this like bell curve of like, discovering it, repeating new route or repeating people's routes, learning about where the standard is, and then trying to make contributions myself to the community,
In those early years, you were trying to test your mettle and pursue these dream climbs and the path of your heroes. And I think at some point, once you had done that, I guess there is that urge to put your own, kind of create your own art, find your own lines, your own, almost like your legacy in a way. And then also the fact that maybe after spending all this time away in the US, you come back to Canada and you realize, wow, like all these things that I've learned and all my progress as a climber, I can come and like bring that to this canvas, which is in my country, in my backyard. One fascinating aspect of what you said is that I love that, like this pursuit of something with complete dedication because of the love for it without knowing the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And there is this like basic contrast, where you want that outcome so bad because you want to send those lines. At the same time, you want to be so invested in the journey that the outcome almost doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that in your words?
Well, I would just go back to saying like that the joy that climbing brought me, physically, emotionally, spiritually, like the joy that I felt through climbing daily. And also the sort of, I don't know if it was pain, but like if I wasn't climbing, like if I was stuck in a place for a month with bad weather, or I was home working because I ran out of money, that was like the hardest month of my life, or 3 months of my life, because it was like the opposite of climbing, It wasn't just that I was climbing a little bit. I was like sometimes not climbing at all. Like it would be winter, I would be gym climbing a little bit, but my heart was like, I want to go travel. And so it was almost like the opposite of being fully fulfilled. But I knew that I was working towards something. The reason I was working was to save up my money. I would plan a trip, and like whether I succeeded at that trip, like climbing at my limit or not, I was committed to going to see these places. The successful part of the climb is like the cherry on top. But everything else, it's the anticipation, it's the preparation, it's the planning, it's the excitement of going to a new climbing area. I remember going to Smith Rock and smelling like the juniper tree that I'd never smelled before. And that scent in the air when you get to Oregon is like Central Oregon is incredible. That high desert feeling, like that's an amazing part of the world. And they all are. Like the feeling of Yosemite Valley on a beautiful day with a sunny day with and you look up at, like it's just these incredible places, and feeling physically connected to it, trying hard, getting tired, sweating, it's just all part of this, like, and then meeting communities and all these little places. Like it was always, to me, it was always the whole package. And the success was like, it was always like this little cherry on top that to me was like, I'm going to go whether I succeed or not. Like it was never about going in order to succeed so that I could do another trip. It was like, I'm committed to 10 years of living like this. This is just how I want to live. It wasn't, if that makes sense.
For sure. Yeah.
It wasn't, I'm grateful and fortunate that things worked out okay. Like I was succeeding at things. But again, I think it's because I had just had a really strong desire to complete some of these routes. And I wasn't going to let a lot of them go. I wasn't going to just dabble, if that makes sense. I was like, if I'm going to try, like Just Do It in Smith Rock, for example, was the first route I tried in Smith Rock. It was like, I drove 50 hours across the continent with my girlfriend at the time,
wow.
Lisa, and we were like trading, sleeping in the front seat. And then the other person would drive for 5 hours. We'd switch, and we just drove straight through because it was winter. It was like March, trying to get across, Des Moines, Iowa, and all this stuff. And we get straight to Smith Rock, 50 hours, and literally get to the parking lot. We have it was like 1:00 in the afternoon and I was like, let's go. And we hiked an hour straight to Just Do It. I didn't warm up on anything. I just got straight on that one rock. Yeah. And then after 7 working days, managed to do the route. And then one of the highlights, you were talking about meeting some of your mentors, at this stage of my life, I was just 20 or 21. And Yuji Harayama and Francois Legrand
Oh,
had
sure.
come to do it that same
Ah,
spring. It was in April, and I had just done the route, and they found me in the parking lot, and they came over and were asking me about beta, and I was like, oh yeah, like left hand,
wow.
right hand, and did you use the intermediate? And they hadn't done it yet, and I can't remember if they did do it or not on that trip, but it was like one of the highlights of my life was them approaching me. And I had only read about them in the magazines. I'd never met them before. And I was like, it was such an honor to be a part of that conversation with them. And so I went from like idolizing them, having them on my walls, to then, conversing with them about this like legendary route. So it was really, really, really memorable moment for sure.
Yeah, what a moment of just awe and humility to
Definitely.
not only come face to face with these two absolute legends of the sport and your personal heroes, and then be in a position to maybe just not go behind just being a fanboy, to actually offer them some kind of help in their own mission, and to actually succeed in like an objective that I'm guessing it must have been. I remember seeing this movie that they made of their US trip. I think it was called The
Yeah.
Professionals, and they just kind of went from like crag to crag, and yeah, I can't remember which climbs they attempted. It was seemed like a very audacious trip to come to the
Definitely.
US for like one trip and just take all of America's hardest climbs. Sonny, you went on these adventures, and you had this deep conviction, which is amazing. Was there any time in those years when maybe that conviction was shaken in some way, and maybe how you were able to kind of bounce back? And I feel like there's a lesson there for us.
I would say not so much in my physical climbing was I shaken. Again, it's because I wasn't. How do I describe this? I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, I suppose. And there was times when I was on a trip, I was living in the back of my truck. I was missing some of my friends, or I had just gone through a breakup, and I was kind of alone. And all of my climbing partners would go back to their home in Boulder or San Francisco or Los Angeles, and I'd be stuck kind of in this climbing area. And back, 25 years ago, a lot of these climbing areas weren't as busy as they are today. There would only be, 3 or 4 or 5 permanent people trying to live out of their cars and stuff like that. There was periods where I'd be like, man, what am I doing here? Like trying to read, like reading a book, and because there's no, there's no Wi-Fi. I didn't own a cell phone for many, many, many years, and just waiting, like kind of like the classic being in a tent on an expedition where it's storming and you're just stuck for days and days and days or weeks. And I was like, what am I doing with my life? There was moments like that for sure where I was like, should I just go home and get a job and get a career and do the typical lifestyle? But home to me was so far away from where I wanted to be. I wanted to be like in the Southwest. I wanted to be where the action was. And it was places like Boulder. It was Utah. It was Nevada. It was California. And I wanted to be there. And also other places around the world like that, like, the south of France. And like, I wanted to be in those places. And so the only way for me to do it, because I didn't have any money, was to just suffer through those periods of darkness, I guess, or bad weather or lack of partnerships and stuff. And I just had to endure those phases. But there was doubt for sure that crept in, and being like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And then honestly, the sun would come back out. All the climbing partners would come back, and I'd send this like really beautiful climb. And I'd be like, this is why I'm doing this. Like this is so worth it. And every time my cup of enthusiasm was slowly dwindling, I would have this incredible week or month, and it would just fill it right to the top. and sometimes overflowing. And I would just go from climbing area to climbing area, and I would just do this over and over. So I hope that touches on your question.
I love that answer, Sonnie, because I can totally relate. So as you've noticed, I'm living out of a van right now. And I've also been on this journey in a van and going to climbing and surfing areas for the last 1 year. And yeah, a bit of a late bloomer on that front. But exactly, like, you go to these amazing areas and you spend time there that you've dreamt about. And then and you spend maybe too long there, and then this group of friends that you found yourself with, they leave.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there's this vacuum, and you're by yourself, and you don't have people to turn to. And maybe, I think these days compared to your early days, you were literally in a vacuum because you did not have, forget phones, forget the internet. You didn't even have phone service.
What? And just, sorry, I wanted to ask that question.
Go ahead.
But I just want to say that every time I had those moments of darkness or doubt, I just knew that the alternative was not what I wanted. And so that's what helped me persevere, because the alternative was not an option for me, if that makes sense.
100%, Sonnie. And I can relate to that as well. Like, I left a life in San Francisco behind.
Mm-hmm.
I had a job in tech, a nice apartment, and it had stopped being fulfilling. It felt like a drain on me, and I had lost the energy for it. So exactly, like, I think about that and I'm like, no, wait a second, it looks nice from a distance, looks shiny and bright, but it's not the life that I want. And that's why I chose this other path.
Yeah.
So I guess, you're right. Exactly. Like,
and there are different chapters of our lives. There are different times for doing certain things, and that's also okay. That's actually wonderful that we have these different phases of life too. And what you're doing now and the way I'm living life, it's different than it was, but it's also wonderful. I heard a really amazing quote that I've actually tried to embrace heavily. And I think I always have, just without knowing it. But when, they say the grass is always greener on the other side, that type of human condition. Well, I heard a quote that says, the grass is greenest where you water it. It just makes me appreciate my journey, because, despite those feelings of doubt or being down, the feelings of being fulfilled or overflowing always surpass that by tenfold. And it's because I stayed and I nurtured and I watered my grass, if that makes sense.
No, Sonnie, I really think that quote was perhaps written for you, because the little that I've learned about your journey over the years and through your book, it seems that you have chosen to go all in and invest in your goals and your life at that moment, and not think about other things, but be fully present. And I notice that now you are a family man, right from making breakfast for the kids to taking them on big adventures at times. And maybe this is a fun segue. You first moved into, let's say, a van when you were a teenager, and then later on in your life, you did van life with your young family. And I think that just blows anybody's mind. Like, it's one thing to do that as a single person or as a couple, but to do that with two young kids. So just for fun, can you paint us a picture of one of those crazy, messy, beautiful family van moments?
I mean, I don't know if I can, I don't know if there's one particular day, but it's
maybe take us to why did you guys decide to, instead of, I don't know, spending time raising a family in a home? Why did you guys do this
Well,
thing?
well, we traveled a lot with our infant son when we just had the one child because under 2 years old, they are cheaper to travel with, and they just don't put up too much of a fuss. They cry, they nap, you do the same thing at home with a small baby like that you would do anywhere else in the world. And so if you're doing the same thing, why stay home if you don't have to? And we were like, well, this is an opportunity for us to get in as much traveling as we can before, because once they turn 3, it gets a little bit harder because you can't fly. You can't fly for free, right? And they need a seat, and but when they're very, very small, it's just easy to. So we did a lot of that. We traveled quite a bit when our son was born. Then we slowed down, I think, a little bit for like a year when he was like 3. And then our daughter was born. And we're like, okay, how are we going to do this? And so we purchased a very small camper trailer and a van. And between the two of them, we had flexibility. Sometimes we could sleep in the van, sometimes in the trailer, or like 2 and 2 or 1 and 2. It was almost like 2 separate quarters. It was like a small van and a small trailer, but together it created a lot of flexibility. And so if our daughter was having a hard night sleeping, I would take her into the van and sleep and bottle feed her and things like that. But basically my philosophy was like, it's just this, we're going to be doing the same parenting things 24 hours a day, whether we live in our home or we live on the road. It doesn't change what you do as a parent. And so the security of having a home meant nothing to me, like this, but the freedom to take our kids and also go climbing. Like if Lydia and I could climb for an hour a day, it was worth it. So 24 hours a day, we're juggling life, sleeping, surviving, feeding, changing clothes, potty training, all that stuff. But if we could climb for an hour a day and go bouldering, and it was a success. I think any parent will tell you that if they get an hour of climbing a day, it's a win. But we didn't want to I just didn't want to go to the gym for an hour. I wanted to go to Bishop. I wanted to go to the Buttermilks or, things like that. Or the bouldering in Yosemite is amazing. Yeah. And luckily I have an incredible wife who's inspired by the same places I am. She loves the national parks. She loves the canyons and the rivers and the mountains. And so it wasn't a very hard sell to push her to do that. We would juggle work obligations from the trailer, or sometimes we would we'd home sit for people. During the Christmas holidays, we had a friend in Bishop who was away, and she's like, "Oh, you can stay at our house for 10 days while we're gone," or things like that. So yeah, it worked out really well. But you kind of have to show up. Like if we weren't there, we wouldn't have had that opportunity to house sit, right? And so there is that other quote, 90% or whatever it is of life is showing up. And I do believe in that. I believe that you have to be in the place in order for something to occur. If I was still in Ontario, nothing would have occurred. Yeah. I talk to my family all the time. I love them and miss them. And, we talk all the time, but I can't live there. The life that I want is not there. The people that I want, the community is there. I miss the people, but the life that I want to live on a daily basis is not there. It's out in lots of different places. And so my wife and I created the ability to move around with our family and continue loving life as much as we can, despite the craziness. Yeah.
Just quickly, in that long trip with your family, perhaps which place may have been just the most welcoming and easiest place to have 2 young kids in a van and be able to actually enjoy yourself?
Yeah, I actually think Bishop was one of we spent well over a month just in Bishop alone. And the weather was consistently pleasant for the most part. It's a small town, so driving around getting groceries or whatever needs you have, or just hanging out at a coffee shop for an hour with your family and enjoying oatmeal and coffee and warming up before the day of climbing. And also the options, all the cool different areas that you can park pretty close by. I know Bishop is now getting very, very busy and very popular, but I felt like we had a really good time there. It was very, I want to say the word easy, but it felt good. The sun was always nice and warm, and the rock is beautiful to climb on, and there's a lot of variety, a ton of variety. So not just like in the rocks type, but also like I could have a project or a climbing objectives for the day, and my wife could, and then our kids could scramble around, and sometimes we find areas with really flat landings for our kids to hang out on. So Bishop is beautiful. Yeah.
Bishop is paradise, and yes, also comfortable.
Yeah,
because of all those things. And perhaps what might be as a contrast, what might have been just the most annoying or challenging place to have visited or traveled through.
Well, so it's kind of the same. It's two sides of the two sides, but Yosemite is really great. It's a small area. Like, again, you have to drive the track sometimes to get, but the difficulties are, securing your camping site, especially if you're there trying to get like canceled reservations, or if you don't have a solid booking, it can be a little finicky. Sometimes we would have to drive way out of the park to get a campsite, and then we'd come back in. But if you do have a spot and you can settle in, Yosemite is very nice also. But then, a huge snowstorm came in and it made life very difficult. So we had to leave. And, so sometimes the weather, when you're kind of living that life, the weather often will dictate whether or not you stay or go. And whether you have a camping site or like reservations or a place to stay that's secure, sometimes that doesn't matter. Sometimes the weather just says, hey, it's time to go home, or it's time to go somewhere else. And so, yeah, I'd say that was a bit finicky. Was Yosemite was a bit challenging trying to secure. I feel like sometimes it's like it takes a big chunk of your day just to set up your situation to make sure that you have a place to sleep. And it's not like we couldn't live like we were when it was just me and my wife, because we had this family to take care of. We had to make certain that we had a place to stay, that we weren't going to get kicked out, that we could take care of our family first, our children. So it wasn't as easy, I guess, so to speak.
Sonnie, I can only imagine, yes, you making me think that, just me and my dog in a van, and sometimes I have to drive like half an hour at night to find that comfortable place to park, which feels safe, has some amenities, which is level, and then to have to deal with the small kids. And yeah, Yosemite and Bishop, it's like a study in logistics contrast. They're both enchanting places.
Yeah,
absolute like outdoor marvels. But Yosemite is so complicated. Like it's difficult. But one thing I did I did find remarkable about your time in Yosemite is, and maybe your triple role is here. You're managing family responsibilities, but you are still pushing hard with your goals, and loved and was inspired by your feat of being able to send Pineapple Express, I think, and in the middle of managing everything and doing this iconic rock face. And I'm curious, like, what did you learn about being able to have the drive and the capacity to achieve this huge goal? And did you surprise yourself?
I think I did. I think when I remember thinking it would take a miracle to do this climb, and to do it in a style that, I was really proud of, which was, trying to do it in a day. and lead every pitch. That was really a really memorable, exciting, terrifying, uncertain day. I knew there was a snowstorm coming the following day. I knew that this was sort of my last window of opportunity. I wouldn't get to, I maybe could go back the next fall, but probably not with my family. We would probably shift gears a little bit. Like, I think living out of a van has a timeline to it for a little while. And then I think, there's, like I was saying earlier, there's different chapters. And I think that comes through in the book. Like, there's a time and place for doing something and going all in. And then there's a time and place for making adjustments and recalibrating, and then maybe doing it again, but maybe in a different way or in a different place. And I just felt like at that time, like that was my main window of opportunity to do this climb. And I think the thing that I learned from it was consistency, because when we had our daughter, my climbing was terrible. I was not able to be as physical as I wanted to be because she was so young. Like, from the time she's born, probably the first 9 months is very, very all in. And we had this other 3-year-old who is, maybe not sleeping well. And so,
Oh boy.
by the time I started, we went on this trip, she was 8 months old, and I started climbing again. I felt very out of my body. I felt like I couldn't communicate with my body to do what I asked it to do. And so we went to the valley. I tried this route. It felt very hard, and I was just getting so tired. Alex and I were doing, like ground up mission, and then we try to fix this climb, like try to fix the route so we knew where the climb would go. And we were cleaning it still. It was a little bit dirty. And so we were putting in a lot of labor and putting in some bolts here and there. And I would come down and I'd be so tired and fatigued. I'd just be crushed. Almost like I had not felt in my adult life. I was getting a little bit older. I was, late 30s, not sleeping very well, and just not climbing it and just getting crushed. And so I had a lot of doubt. And then over the next 6 months, between like the spring and the fall of November, when I did the climb, a lot turned around. And I think it just showed up consistency again. I was doing routes that were long, like 100, 110 foot long routes that I love that style. I love that length. I love that fight of like 90, 80, 90, 100 feet. 50 feet is fun too, but it feels a bit more like powerful and bouldering. Once you get past like 70, 80 feet, it feels like you're really fighting. And I just love that style. And so I was climbing in Smith Rock, and here in the Rockies, went to Squamish, was climbing longer routes like that. And by the time I came back in the fall, I felt like I was a new climber again. I had completely changed my base and felt fit and strong. Although I didn't know if I felt that fit or that strong. So I still had a lot of doubt and managed to pull it off. And it was a wonderful climb, climbing memory and day. And a lot of people are doing that route now, which is super exciting to see. It's getting quite a fair bit of traffic and repeats, and it's awesome. I love being a part of that contribution.
That might be my favorite style of climbing as well, like long sport routes or just long routes where you kind of get into that flow.
Yes.
And then you basically you climb until you can't anymore.
Yeah, totally.
And then you come off, and it's just, that's just, to me, that captures the essence of what I love about the sport. But you were, again, like, I'm just blown away, Sonnie. You managed, it's one thing to, let's say, be able to send, let's say, your hardest boulder problem, for example, right? Because bouldering requires just less, let's say, time commitment in a way. Like, you can train maybe with your family around you, and you can be at the boulders for a couple hours and go all out, and then, go back to making dinner for the kids. But you did this like really long climb on El Cap, and it's not just the climbing itself and the preparation you talked about, but it's also the training. And you talked a little bit about like how over the season how did you manage to like I don't know, create that kind of fitness to be able to then show up in Yosemite and then and then, have this like high pressure window of time where you're like, okay, I have to be ready on point.
Yeah.
So when I get there, I have just these few days to execute.
Yeah.
And you did,
Yeah.
snowstorm coming the next. I mean, this is kind of like the makings of like kind of like a movie, right? Like everything's just coming together, and then there's this climax, and the hero journey, basically.
So I kind of geek out. Like at the end of the day, I'm just a climbing nerd, and I really like to reverse engineer my objectives. And I think I started doing that like quite early on in my climbing. I'd be like, okay, I want to climb 14C or 14D or whatever it was, back in 2000. And I was like, and this style is in the wall is in this angle or this angle. And I knew that if I did things at this angle, it just wouldn't prepare me for this angle. Like I just reversed everything. And I was like, okay, well, and if I need to do 80 moves in this style, right? How do I prepare my body for 80 repetitions of this style at my limit? And so I think I always just reversed engineered things. I always wanted to be a little bit stronger than I needed to be to climb the route. And I still approach climbing like that. I still approach my goals today like that, because it's not reasonable for me anyway. Maybe for like Adam Ondra, it's fine, or for people who are, capable of doing so much volume, I don't know. But for me, I had to pick certain climbs in certain areas over phases of time and be like, I'm just going to focus on this one style, because I felt like I couldn't be a V12, V13 boulderer in this style and then go to Smith Rock and climb the boulder not to be in the same, like, or whatever it is, like in the exact same window.
Or
I feel like
climb at that style at its zenith.
Yeah.
Right? Like perform at like a lower level of intensity. But
Yeah.
to perform optimally, you had to kind of prepare yourself in that style.
Yeah. And I needed a little bit of time to shift and prepare myself. And so with that particular route, I knew that these pitches were long and technical and pumpy. And I knew that they were back to back to back. And so when I went cragging, the way that I was structured my day is I would go for half a day. I'd run back to the camper or whatever. And then Lydia, my wife, would take half a day to go bouldering with her girlfriends or go for a long run or something like that. So we would structure the day where I had half the day. And I never climbed in the middle of the day. I always climbed in the morning or the evening. And then my wife, so that way we felt very like balanced. And there was times like, of course, when I was up on El Cap, that was most of the day. But when I was just cragging, if I was in Smith Rock, I would try to bang out 4 or 5 long pitches very quickly and then be finished by 1 o'clock, And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I would take the main objective and then I would reverse it and be like, how can I focus on these climbs in this style, in this condensed period of time that would help me get higher fitness for the actual day of attempts,
Sure.
Yeah. And so like even today, like I actually remember, I remember reading about Francois Legrand again back in 1998. And he would do something like, I believe it was 300 513 moves a day. And so he was on like, your training board, he'd have all the different angles, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 degrees. But he wouldn't finish training unless he did about 300 movements of around 513 level. And I was fascinated by that amount of, well, 1, volume, but 2, like approach, because when you're doing World Cup competitions and the finals is a 13D or 14A on site back in the 1990s, like your fitness had to be through the roof. And so I was like, well, how many moves am I doing a day? Like, am I doing 300? Am I doing 400? Am I doing 100? When we go to the climbing gym and we start talking with our friends and we do 3 pitches, and we're like, oh yeah, I'm kind of tired. I'm going to go home. Like,
yeah.
Did you actually like do enough to be better the next week or the next month? Or are you just doing enough to have a good time and maintain, And I'm not saying it's all about results, but if there's goals and objectives you have, I think it's important to look at it more seriously, more analytically. Yeah.
And even in a lifestyle sport like rock climbing, and even on a big road trip, I think there's a lesson here on how one can break down like really big, audacious goals into manageable chunks. Because I think myself and maybe people listening, we don't always think of, a route and a goal in that kind of way where you can like think of the total number of moves and maybe think of like how one can like replicate that kind of intensity, that kind of volume at the gym or at a different crag, and think about that big objective, but think about like how you can get something out of your day at the crag, which will help one get to that big objective.
And I want to be, sorry, I just want to be clear. Like, it's not something I do all the time. It's when I realize that there's a climb or an objective that's very important to me. And, I'm a climber through and through, lifestyle, like everything, but there are times where I ramp it up to try to do something. And then there are times when I come down the other side, and it's this journey of these waves. And so for sure, like, I think helping to look at climbing just a little bit more, I don't know, maybe the word is just mindful, like being like, am I actually doing something that's going to help me achieve my goal or not? So I just think sometimes that's helpful in life. And I just want to say that it's never like a straight up line. It's always these waves,
And yeah, sometimes the goal could be, hey, I'm going to go on this climbing trip, let's say to Bishop again.
Yeah.
And the goal is to be carefree and hang with my friends and just do a bit of volume and have a good time. And that's a very reasonable goal to have. And then the other goal, because one can't always have like really big intense goals and preparations, because that just leads to burnout. Sonnie, so many more things we could talk to you about, but we're coming towards the end. And when you think about legacy, and like, what do you hope your kids, or even maybe a 20-year-old climber who's reading your book, or a 50-year-old athlete who's listening to this conversation, what do you want them to take away about how you lived and climbed?
Okay. Geez, that's a good question. There's a part of me that says, I don't want them to take anything away. Like, I want them to feel their own path forward, their own life, But if someone asked me, how I approached my life so far and how I hope I can continue to approach it, I would say that life is shorter than we think. And I don't mean to say that, in a negative way. I actually think it's a liberating feeling to say life is short, because what it does to me is I don't want to waste any time. That's how I look back and I'm like, I don't think I've wasted very much time of my life on this planet, because I recognize that it's happening so fast. And I felt like I had a lot of goals that if I didn't pursue them, with desire and quickness, I feel like it's very easy that they can escape us. And so when I say life is short, I don't mean to say it in a sounding like in any kind of depressing way. It's encouraging, because life is short is why we should pursue things sooner than later. If I had to say anything, it would be listen to yourself very closely and intently, and follow the thing that makes you feel like the most fire, and then follow that with intensity, I guess, Because if it's the thing that fills you up the most, it's probably the thing that makes life worth living the most, which is the most fulfilling. And I would say do it quickly, because not to say that you can't do things later in life, but who knows what's going to happen, and who knows how life might change or become, and so that would be my final words of advice, is that life is short and do it now.
That is beautiful. And like you said early in the conversation, not all of us, or very few of us, even have the privilege of being able to pursue life beyond just meeting human needs.
Yeah. True.
And then even fewer get a taste of what it means to have found something so beautiful, so addictive, so joy-giving. So I think my takeaway here is that if one does find oneself in that enviable situation,
Mm-hmm.
then one owes it to oneself to give it just complete love and just take it as far as one can. And you have just done that, Sonnie, and it's been a joy to read your beautiful book for climbers and non-climbers alike. Thank you for sharing all of that with us, and wishing you luck with what comes next.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot to hear from you and others. I'm glad people are enjoying the book. It's very warming, when I get feedback like that. So I appreciate it, and I do hope that it can inspire someone out there to pursue the thing that they love with love and courage. And I would say my final note, just on the topic before, was when people ask me what are my main goals right now, I tell them it's to stay healthy. It's to not get injured. So my approach to climbing, like you said, you can just go to Bishop and have fun with your friends. Like, I want to stay healthy. And so my approach to climbing is like healthy body, healthy joints first and foremost, if I can. It's not always a certainty, but I do my best. And so that's my number one goal. And then all my other goals are secondary, because I think you have to be healthy in order to achieve anything. So that would be my final words of advice: is stay as healthy as possible to pursue the passion.
100%. And thanks for sharing that. Since you said that, I have to ask. Yes, that's what a lot of this podcast is about. It is about being able to continue keeping those faculties that allow us to keep following our dreams. So, Sonnie, what might be one daily practice that you have brought into your routine that allows you to stay healthy, not just for today, but for the years to come?
First thing that comes to my mind is sleep. I would prioritize sleep. I would prioritize a lot of things, but I think sleep is, without a good, restful sleeping routine, everything else is more difficult. And I learned this because of being a parent. I learned what happens to my body when I'm not sleeping well or through the night. And when I started sleeping normal again, everything changed. And so now in my mid 40s and soon to be late 40s, I've realized how much I appreciate and benefit from a really good sleep. So if you're going to bed at 11 and waking up at 5 a.m, like, I think it works for some people for a certain amount of time, but I don't know if that's the best, most wise thing for longevity, for like a long period of time, right? So that's my advice. That's what's been helpful for me recently, is better and longer quality of sleep, and not to feel bad about it. Like, if I sleep for 8 hours, that's amazing. I don't need to feel bad and be like, oh, I'm not being productive. I need to get up at 6 hours of sleep, or I need to wake up at 5 a.m. and do my exercises. Like, I think making sure that you feel recovered is like my number one tip, because recovery allows you to reset and start over again. If you're not feeling recovered, you're starting from a deficit, and for me, it just doesn't work. It feels harder. So that'd be my one tip is prioritize sleep and recovery and build everything else on top of that.
Friends, this is not an ad. This is just a quick message to those amongst us who are listening to Ageless Athlete podcast for the first time. I would love it if you would hit subscribe and follow on your favorite podcast app, whether it's Apple Podcast or Spotify or Stitcher or Overcast or what have you. We bring you stories and routines and other inspiration from elites in the world of the best outdoor sports. In each episode, you will find how these athletes stay connected to the outdoors, maintain peak performance, and continue to thrive as they age. I encourage you to look through Brad episodes and listen to a couple and see if they resonate. And then, come back next week. We release an episode each week. And I am really inspired to bring you some of the best stories from the world of the outdoors. Okay, back to the show.